Hello everyone, my name is Daniel and I'm just a casual racer, and today I'm going to be reviewing Turtle Beach's latest sim racing product here, and that is their VelocityOne Multi-Shift shifter. And it's aptly named because it has a wide variety of functions, more than most shifters. First, it is the H pattern mode, but also with a high-low button, so you can switch from 6 to 7 gears to 12 or 14. It has a sequential shifter switch here on the side that you can select, and then it will work in a sequential mode. And then, of course, when you're in that mode, you can also hit the handbrake button to enable it to be read as a handbrake. So it's essentially 4 functions within one, or 3 plus a lot of variety off of the H pattern, perhaps is a better way to put it. This product is priced at $140, which is very reasonable and puts it kind of in the low mid range, or maybe the upper entry level for shifters. There's not a lot of H pattern shifters, so I'm probably more to say it's on the upper entry level kind of pricing. It's priced aggressively for the amount of features it has. It's built relatively well. If you pick it up, there's some heft to it, and this product comes in feeling more like a mid range. So perhaps then it's more fair to think of this as the most affordable option within the mid-range shifter market. I've got a range of shifters here that I'll be taking a comparison and walking you through my thoughts on that. But first, let's dive into the quality and the feel of the multi-shift shifter here. Alrighty, so now focusing on the quality of the construction and the build, let's kind of start from the bottom and work our way up. The bottom is a hard metal plate, so that's going to be great for mounting. It has the screw mounts there. The clamp is extremely high quality, actually probably more quality of this than the entire Logitech shifter, to be honest. Push this flap in and you can adjust that with an included Allen key. You have the ability to also mount through the shifter, and those are also nicely tapped options there for you to mount. And overall, the entire body is kind of a very hard plastic, but there's some heft to this, and none of it feels like cheap plastic. It's well built. There's a fake kind of carbon fiber pattern here on the wheel. There's a nice kind of cover. The boot cover is what they call this, some people do. And it is really kind of, I believe this is it's probably not genuine, but it feels very similar to what you'd find on most mid to entry level cars, and in a similar way that's what you're going to find here on this shifter as well. This knob here is got a lot of plastic. It's got kind of the fake leather here, plastic. It feels very cheap, but you'd find maybe on a very entry level car, maybe even a little cheaper. They do include 2 other options though for your shifter handle. The one that's designed for the sequential shifter, you'll see that it's got the plus minus on it, is made of metal, still plastic on the top, but it does feel a bit more premium. And then of course they include a third option here, so you can mount your own third-party shifter knobs as you desire. They also include, they're fully metal, well built, threads are thick and they're not going to be stripped at all easily. And it's actually, there's a hole here so you can put, and this is on all 3, so you can put an Allen key through that and really tighten it down, which you're going to want to do. So if you don't do that, in my experience, it did eventually come loose on me. Once I tightened that down, for the week I've been using it very heavily, I have not had it come loose on me at all since then. Overall, my impression in terms of like the quality of the general is quite good. This is kind of what I mentioned. This is a mid-range build here in terms of quality. I will say one last thing though. The buttons here, there is some illumination as well that will occur. And these buttons here, not great, not terrible. The feel is maybe upper entry level buttons. I don't know. They're not horrible. They're not mushy. There's that nice click, but there's nothing rewarding about pressing them either. I doubt that's a big deal for you. In terms of switching to handbrake mode, you're not going to be going back and forth actively when you're sim racing. The high-low button you would be using more if you're a trucker. I would say that it would have been nice if that was a more tactile feeling, but it's still, there's nothing wrong with it. I've never had any issues with misshifts, misapplications of the buttons. On the side here, switching between H pattern mode to sequential mode and back to H pattern, very easy to slide. For example, with the Fanatec, it is a very stiff button or switch that you really have to push. This one, I can just be sitting there easily in my rig and just reach over and it goes really easily. So that's really a kind of a nice feature to be able to easily go back and forth between the sequential and H pattern mode, and especially then of course like with the trucker sim, that's feature that's tied, the high-low is tied to the H pattern and the handbrake is on the sequential side. So important to be able to switch back and forth between those, and it does so well. Alright, so I'm going to do my best to now convey how the VelocityOne Multi-Shift feels when you're using the various shifting modes. So first with the H pattern mode, it feels a lot kind of like a mid-range or entry-level sedan in how the gates feel and moving. There's that nice kind of action you have to push through. It's pretty stiff. It's slightly stiffer than Fanatec's, for example, if you want a sim racing comparison, and obviously much stiffer than the almost joystick-like action of the Logitech shifter. And so really feels nice, but you're not getting necessarily like a Ford Mustang type gate action, which is, you know, really stiff. Some sports cars, muscle cars, you really have that kind of heavy clutch, heavy shifting. It's not to that degree. If you're looking for something like that, generally you're going to be looking for a much more premium shifter. I've heard there are some kind of mid-range options that do deliver that, but they're only H pattern mode is the only offering that they'll deliver. So very good realistic feel for the H pattern mode, but maybe not the stiffest. So if you really want a heavy shifter, you're not getting that, but you are getting a very realistic and good H pattern shifter. Talking now about the sequential mode, this is one area where it begins to differ, for example, from the Fanatec Club Sport shifter. Fanatec Club Sport shifter mode has a much more kind of that same gait, feels really good. With the VelocityOne Multi-Shift, when it's in its sequential shifter mode, it doesn't feel as good as when you're even using the H pattern shifter. It's more of a linear action. You don't have that gate you're going through. Unlike with the Fanatec Club Sport shifter, you still kind of go through that gate. You have that, you push up and it kind of, you go over the gate and the ease, and then you let it off and it pops back. It's a nice action, but it almost feels more of like rolling over something and into up or into down, and then then it springs back. Feels fine. It feels tactile. It feels fine, but it is nowhere nearly as good as what Fanatec's Club Sport shifter offers within its sequential shifting mode. So that's an area where perhaps if you wanted a really, really high quality sequential shifter, you're not really going to get that with the VelocityOne Multi-Shift, but you still get the really kind of high quality, solid H pattern shifting mode and a serviceable, good, although not great, sequential shifter mode. One thing also to notice as well, when you're in the sequential mode, there is some side-to-side play. I'll show that here. And that, you know, it just doesn't feel quite, whereas if we look at the Fanatec as an example. Oh, sorry, not in the right mode. Almost no play. So that's one difference. Obviously, the Logitech doesn't even have a sequential shifter mode. A lot of H pattern shifters don't. So that's where it's still like good, not great, but it also still has it. But wait, we're not done. There's more. So if you hit the handbrake mode, nothing changes in terms of the feel, but now how it registers when you pull back, it now acts as a handbrake. I'll be honest, there's still kind of that rolling gait, not a super strong gait. I believe it is why the gait isn't so strong. One reason I believe the sequential shifter isn't quite as good feeling as it could be is because it's also essentially used for that handbrake. And you can still modulate kind of that pull. You can still pull it back and feel and you know, not go all the way to 100%. So you can do that 50, 60, 70% pull. There is still a little bit of a gait, so it's not like it's the easiest thing ever to modulate. For example, if I look, this is a relatively cheap generic handbrake, which you can get off like AliExpress and a few other places. This one, obviously, when you pull on it, easier to modulate. It's also a stiffer pull. And you can change out the spring and things like that. So, in that sense, the handbrake isn't probably quite as good as even kind of a generic shifter, or excuse me, a generic handbrake that you could get off of AliExpress or whatever. But once again, you have that H pattern shifter, you have that sequential mode, and you have the handbrake mode, and it's all in one unit. And I think that's one of the great things about this VelocityOne Multi-Shift. It does absolutely nothing wrong, and it is well built. And the primary mode, the H pattern mode, is excellent. And in everything else, you just have it as a feature set. I would say if they were going to do a version 2 at some point, which is it really worth doing, especially like what would this, how would this affect the price? But let's say down the road they really want to try to improve this. I would say work on keeping the really good quality gates for the sequential mode, and perhaps have the switch on the side go into a third position for the handbrake, and then that changes the internals. Because right now, like I said, it's essentially using the same internal mechanism, just changing how the software and the drivers recognize whether it's sequential or whether it's a handbrake mode. So that's the best way I can kind of convey it. Feels really good. I love it for the H pattern shifting mode. It feels fantastic. In terms of value, I guess this is where I'll touch on this a little bit. Overall, for the amount of modes you're getting, this is priced at $140. This is priced at $270. And I would say overall, personally, I like this more, even if this worked, because the other thing is, I'll give it that, the Fanatec doesn't work anymore. Personally, I prefer the ability to have all those functions in one shifter and not have to try to fit all these different, handbrake and the Fanatec shifter on my same rig. Often the handbrake just wasn't there. Now it's all in one unit. It mounts easily, and I just change the modes. And if I'm in a rally mode, sure. If there is the combination where you're driving an H pattern shifting rally car that also would have the handbrake, I can't do that. Okay, that's the one combination I can't really enjoy. But really, is that a big enough limitation? If I'm really that concerned, I could go get a separate handbrake and still use the H pattern mode and have another handbrake. So it's not like it prevents you from still doing a couple of different things. So you have the option to drive the most unique and nuanced cars and their combinations of controls. This doesn't stop you from that, but it does allow you, if this is okay, I get this for the H pattern mode, but it also has the other modes. That's just the gravy on top. That's just the bonus. And so, in my opinion, at the price point it's coming in at $140, $270, more features, same or maybe slightly better H pattern shifting mode, and it absolutely obliterates the Logitech, for example, which is that $50 to $60 point. But it only does H pattern shifting, feels like a joystick, and is pretty awful. Compare that to this, which is, going to have 3-4 features for $140. If you literally valued, let's say, the H pattern shifter, which they're not even on the same playing field, not even close, but let's say you value the same, that's $50. We'll also value a handbrake. Well, let's say another $50. And then let's say you value the sequential mode, that's another $50. You're actually, each of the individual components is at least more affordable if you broke this down than the cost of the Logitech shifter. This is a really good value proposition for what it offers. I think the overall price of $140 is actually going to kind of reset the market, hopefully, for some of these shifters, because it is an excellent price point. And when you're driving something like this, to me, where you cannot tell the difference when you're using it really between anything in the mid-range, it's as good. Unless you're going directly back and forth, you're not even going to notice. Like I said, it's as good as a $270 shifter. The only difference is I've had a $1,000 shifter that, yes, it was better. It felt better in the H pattern mode, but it only was an H pattern shifter. It was $1,000. Most people aren't going to be looking to get something like that. This fits perfectly. And also the other nice thing is we're not talking about $270 for some people. You're spending close to that on a wheelbase, and and then you got to add your wheel to the rim or whatever you want to use. But when your shifter costs that much, it's hard for people to see kind of the side accessory, which is how it's often viewed, that might not be used all the time. At that price point, $300 or whatever to the door, that's a lot of money. $150 to the door, tax and shipping and everything, because shipping generally is free for this product. That is a lot more oh, I can pull the trigger on that as something that's going to be on the side of my rig. Oh, and it has all these features because, yeah, I'm sure sometimes they'll use the handbrake. I'm sure sometimes they'll H pattern. Sometimes they'll use the sequential mode. You know, it hits that price point so perfectly for what it offers. And yeah, it has literally blown me away. I will say my impression of this shifter is when I got it, I had heard some news from a few people, said it's pretty good, you should get one. And when I got it, this thing has blown me away with how good it feels on my rig. And it's funny because, you know, the Velocity I had, Turtle Beach sent me over their wheelbase, and it was not good. It was tacky, felt cheap. I mean, if only they had built their wheelbase to feel as solidly built as this shifter. You know, could have been a lot different story for that. This is almost, it feels like it was almost built by an entirely different company with how great this is. The one thing I will say is that their wheel, they tried to do a lot of things, possibly too many things. They had a button box, you know, they had the dash, the visual dash. It seems that's going to be their approach. Turtle Beach, really, with their VelocityOne Sim Racing series, they really want to have products that do a lot of things. But the thing is, you have to do the main thing really, really well. And thankfully, with this product they have, it's well built, the H-pattern shifting mode is excellent, and then the other stuff is good, and it's just additional, and it just makes the entire package have that better value proposition, and it's priced correctly. Whereas with the VelocityOne wheelbase, it wasn't priced correctly initially, and now it's priced quite nicely, actually quite aggressively, I must say, and it's selling relatively well for them from what I've heard. I do want to touch on a couple last things, and then I'll kind of rank these shifters, in my opinion, real quick. I'm going to show you how to kind of swap the shifter knobs here. So, for example, you can pull this down. I don't believe I have this so tight. Yeah, there it goes. I had to loosen it before this video so I could show you this. This is how you switch the shifter knobs. So this is what I actually have been using lately. I'll show you that in a second. So I switched this out. I've actually been using the Fanatec knob. You could use any third-party shifter knob of your choice. I will say the threads don't exactly match perfectly, but it goes on enough and it's solid enough. It goes down, doesn't go down all the way, but it feels solid enough and it stays solid, doesn't like move around. And you just push down right here on kind of the cover here. Boop. And then you tighten this down with an Allen key. And from now, boom, I have a shifter here, which feels excellent because, you know, the shifter knob feels really, really good. And I can use this however I want. And that's fantastic. I really like that VelocityOne has not been afraid to, both with their wheel and with this, to allow kind of third-party usage. Obviously, you know, they do have their kind of unique quick release size, but they don't lock you up from the force feedback. So once there's adapters for that, it'll be good. Same thing with the shifter. They include a way for you to add third-party knobs to it, which is great, right? Logitech, you can't really do that very easily. Fanatec, yes, if you fit the threads kind of well, but it doesn't they don't provide you with the exact separate kind of rod. Because right now, if I want to, I can now switch between any of these three. I can just have these sitting there, and depending on what car I'm driving, depending on, you know, what I'm doing, whether I'm in a handbrake mode or not, I could get something really vintage and put it on here, and suddenly now I can switch between these three different shifters, levers and knobs, at any point when I'm driving. And that just, right, when you have the correct, is similar to when you change out your wheel rims, right? It allows you to kind of immerse yourself in the car. Similar thing that you can do here at the VelocityOne, and I really appreciate that they kind of give you these options here. I think it's really great. So, first let's discuss the handbrakes, and I'll rank those. So in terms of the handbrake mode and the comparison here to this generic shifter, yes, the generic shifter is a better deal. I think this cost me under $100, or maybe I bought it in a bulk with a few other things. But generally this is value, 50 to 70 bucks. You can find one of these pretty cheaply. And overall, if you just wanted a handbrake and you didn't care about any of the others, this is actually going to be better handbrake for you. All right, and in terms of the shifters here, we're actually looking at The best, and this is straight up, this is without any value proposition, the best H pattern experience, in my opinion, is the VelocityOne head up. Close behind it, very close behind it, is the Fanatec, the H pattern shifter mode. And then, of course, far, far behind both of those would be the Logitech shifter. And then, of course, touching on the sequential shifter, the Fanatec sequential shifter is slightly better. Noticeably better. The gate's stronger. Although, of course, no issues with the VelocityOne Multi-Shift sequential mode, of course. And everything just works well for the VelocityOne Multi-Shift. The only, like I've mentioned, it really just comes down to kind of that feel, and I'm being very picky here. Obviously, I haven't had a chance to use this for a while, so in terms of like a long-term support and things like that, and the quality of the internal mechanism, I don't know in terms of the accuracy, but I do know with the Fanatec, for about 2 years, it started about 1.5 years, I started noticing occasionally when I'd shift into a gear, it would register, for example, you shift to third, it still thinks you're shifting to first, and you blow a car's engine up. You know, that gets really annoying. About 2 years of ownership, and I use, you know, developing software and things like that. I'm on my rig a lot, so I'm using my H pattern shifter for probably a couple hours a day generally. So they get pretty heavy use, and Fanatec just could not stand up to it. And by 2 years, it was unusable. I've actually haven't been able to use a high quality H pattern shifter for quite a while, and I've been stuck relying on the old Logitech. Since the last week that I've had the VelocityOne Multi-Shift shifter, it has just been fantastic. I've really enjoyed it. I give it full recommendations. I know with the VelocityOne wheelbase, could not recommend that base. 100% recommend. I think the value proposition is perfect. This is an amazing, potentially market kind of resetting or redefining product here by Turtle Beach. I really hope that in the long term, quality is there in the internal mechanism, and this thing goes for 2 years with my heavy usage without any issues. And I will put an update out if I have an issue with it. There'll definitely be an update, and if I don't and we get to that 2-year mark from now, I've been using this thing heavily as a daily driver, then this thing is certainly going to get a follow-up video and even more of a commendation. So overall, you know, this is going to be available in a lot of different retailers like Best Buy, and really it's a high quality product for a very affordable price. I think this could be market redefining. And ultimately, if you're looking at an H pattern shifter and trying to decide which one to get, this one's really, really good. And it comes with a couple of their extra features that are just going to be nice to have too. So I definitely give this my full recommendation. Check it out. Links down in the video description. Most of all, though, I hope you all have a fantastic rest of your week.